You begin your journey in the rugged hills of Corsica, 1769. The island, recently purchased by France from the Genoese, resents its new rulers. Among the coarse winds and political unrest, a boy is born into a modest noble family, Napoleon Bonaparte. You feel the tension in his household. Though technically nobility, the Bonapartes are anything but wealthy. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, serves the French court to maintain a delicate balance of pride and survival. For young Napoleon, this duality, being both insider and outsider, will define everything. At the age of 9, you are sent to France to study at the military academy of Brienne-le-Château. You speak French awkwardly, with a thick Corsican accent. Your classmates mock you, not just for your tongue, but for your provincial clothes and sharp intensity. Alone, misunderstood, and simmering with a quiet fury, you dive into books. Caesar, Alexander, Charlemagne. You study them not as legends, but as blueprints. Your intelligence is undeniable. Teachers note your brilliance in mathematics and artillery. But socially, you remain withdrawn, developing an intense inner world. You begin writing political essays as a teenager, fiercely proud of Corsican independence. At night, you dream of battles and empires. You don't just want to fight wars, you want to bend history to your will. By 1785, you graduate from École Militaire in Paris. Barely 16, you are commissioned as a second lieutenant of artillery. Your father has died, and responsibility falls upon you to support your family. France, meanwhile, teeters on the brink of collapse. Revolution stirs. The monarchy is about to fall. You sense it. Opportunity is coming. The French Revolution explodes in 1789. Chaos floods the streets of Paris and across the provinces. The old order shatters. In this volatile landscape, you realize that promotions no longer require birthright, they require brilliance. And you have that in abundance. Toulon, a royalist revolt, has given this strategic port to the British. The Republic is desperate. You, a young artillery captain, propose a bold maneuver. Seize the heights and position your guns to control the harbor. The plan works. The British flee. Your tactics save the city. Paris takes notice. You are promoted to brigadier general at 24. Overnight, your name echoes through revolutionary corridors. Then comes Vendémiaire, 1795. Royalists again threaten the fragile republic, this time in Paris. You are called upon to defend the government. You give the infamous order. Give them a whiff of grapeshot. Your cannons mow down the insurgents in the streets. The rebellion is crushed. But it's not just the rebels who fall. It is the last illusion that Napoleon Bonaparte is a mere soldier. You are now the Republic's sword and its rising star. In the aftermath, you are offered command of the Army of Italy. Many see it as a demotion, but you see something different. A stage. Italy is divided, rich and ripe for conquest. You take charge of a ragtag force, hungry, ill-equipped, demoralized. You transform them with sheer will. You march swiftly through the Alps, striking Austrian forces with lightning precision. In one campaign after another, you defeat armies far larger than your own. You don't just fight, you maneuver. You outthink, outpace, outsurprise. At every stop, you send back dispatches to Paris. Eloquent, dramatic, filled with heroic imagery. You control your image with as much skill as your strategy. France sees you not merely as a general, but as a myth. And yet, behind the scenes, something more is forming. You begin negotiating treaties directly. You sidestep ministers. You loot art from Italian cities and send it home to decorate the Louvre. Your fame feeds the Republic, but your ambition begins to grow beyond it. In 1798, your eyes turn east. You propose an expedition to Egypt, not just as military conquest, but as a civilizing mission. You take scientists, engineers, artists. You envision yourself as a modern Alexander, bringing enlightenment to ancient lands. The campaign begins with triumph. Alexandria falls. But the British Navy, under Nelson, crushes your fleet at Abu Qir Bay. You are stranded. In Egypt, you explore pyramids by torchlight. You write political articles for local papers. You battle both Mamluks and plague. And when word reaches you that France is floundering again, politically fragmented, losing ground, you make a bold decision. You abandon your army and return to France. Some call it betrayal. But you return a hero. The legend remains intact. Paris is in disarray. The Directory, the government of 5 men, is weak, corrupt, and directionless. You see it for what it is, a decaying system begging to be replaced. With quiet precision, you begin laying the groundwork for power. You court allies, flatter key officials, and gather loyal troops. Then, on the 18th of Brumaire, 1799, you strike. It is not a coup of blood, but of speed and manipulation. You enter the chambers, declare the Republic under threat, and install a new constitution. You are named first consul. France applauds the return of order. The revolution is declared complete. You have not destroyed it, you have inherited it. You walk the halls of the Tuileries Palace now, no longer as a soldier but as a statesman. You command not just battalions but ministries. And yet, the question lingers, how did a Corsican outsider become the ruler of France in a single decade? You know the answer. In a world craving order, you offered victory. In an era of chaos, you offered vision. You are no longer Napoleon the officer, nor Napoleon the general. You are Napoleon the architect of a new France. But what kind of France will it be? You sit at the heart of France's power now, no longer responding to history but directing it. As first consul, you hold executive authority under the new constitution, but in practice, you are already governing like a monarch. And you move fast. You reform the tax system, stabilize the economy, re-establish ties with the Catholic Church through the Concordat, and centralize government administration under your rule. Every decision strengthens your control. But power isn't only built in offices and council rooms. You understand public perception better than any ruler before you. You create your own legend in real time. Artists paint you as a stoic savior of France. Generals speak of your genius with reverence. And the press becomes your mouthpiece. You know that the French people don't just want peace, they want glory. And you give them both. In 1800, you cross the Alps with your army, not just for tactical advantage but for symbolism. You ride over the Great St. Bernard Pass on a white horse, cloaked in command, creating one of the most iconic images in military history. You crush the Austrians at Marengo. You return triumphant. The streets of Paris ring with your name. You are the man who brings victory, again and again. But behind the triumph is orchestration. You carefully edit battle reports before they reach the public. You downplay your losses, exaggerate your heroics. This isn't vanity, it's calculation. You aren't merely fighting wars. You are building myth. You reorganize France under your authority. Prefects report directly to you. The educational system trains loyal citizens, and the Napoleonic Code rewrites French law into a model that will endure for centuries. You claim it's a gift to the people, and it is, in part. But it also ensures uniform obedience. The Senate, filled with men you elevate, now moves to make your title permanent. In 1804, they offer you something unprecedented in Republican France. The crown. You accept, but you do more. In a moment heavy with symbolism, you take the crown from the Pope's hands and place it on your own head. You declare yourself Emperor of the French. It's not just ceremony. It's a message. You don't receive power, you take it. Now, with the empire forged, you look outward again. Britain remains your greatest rival. The island nation, unyielding and rich with trade, undermines your continental ambitions. You prepare an invasion across the English Channel, but the British Navy, as always, dominates the seas. So you shift strategy. If you can't defeat them on water, you will crush them with economic warfare. You launch the continental system, a vast embargo designed to isolate Britain from European trade. But it hurts your allies as much as it hurts your enemy. And enforcement demands domination. One by one, you compel or conquer neutral states. Prussia, Austria, Italy, each falls before your Grande Armée. At Austerlitz in 1805, You destroy the combined forces of Austria and Russia in what is considered your greatest tactical masterpiece. You divide and trap them in a fog-covered battlefield, exploiting terrain, timing, and deception. The result: a catastrophic loss for the Allies and a towering triumph for you. Europe watches in awe and fear. You redraw borders. You place your brothers on thrones, Joseph in Spain, Louis in Holland, Jerome in Westphalia. This isn't just conquest, it's dynasty. You are no longer content with victory. You want legacy. But in Spain, something goes wrong. The people revolt. You send troops. Guerrilla warfare erupts. The Peninsular War bleeds French forces for years. Worse, British troops land under Arthur Wellesley, the future Duke of Wellington, and push your forces back. It is a long, grinding war you cannot fully win. And then there's Russia. You and Tsar Alexander had once signed a pact. You met on a raft in the middle of the Neman River, splitting Europe like two gods dividing the world. But the alliance fractures. Russia chafes under the continental system. Alexander begins trading with Britain again. So you prepare to punish him. You gather the largest army Europe has ever seen, over 600,000 men, from across the continent. The Grande Armée marches east in 1812. You enter Russia expecting a quick campaign. But the Russians refuse to fight. They retreat deeper, scorching earth as they go. You arrive in Moscow, but it is empty and burning. You wait for surrender. None comes. Winter begins. Supply lines stretch and snap. Cold, starvation, disease, your army collapses. Of the 600,000 who marched in, fewer than 100,000 stagger back. For the first time, your myth cracks. Europe rises against you. The Sixth Coalition forms: Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria. They strike at once. You fight heroically, desperately, but your enemies have learned your tactics. In 1814, Paris falls. Your marshals urge surrender. You abdicate. They exile you to Elba, a tiny island off the Italian coast. But even in exile, you remain restless. You reorganize the island, draft reforms, plan escape. You are not done. In 1815, you return to France. Your army, sent to arrest you, instead joins you. No shots fired. Crowds flock to you. You reclaim Paris in what will be called the 100 Days. But Europe doesn't forgive. The coalition regroups. You meet them at Waterloo. There, on muddy Belgian ground, your empire faces its final test. You are gone now. Your body lies beneath the dome of Les Invalides in Paris, reburied with imperial honors. But you are not at rest. Your name still echoes in the chambers of power, in war colleges, in political theory, in every debate that dares ask, what is greatness? And what is too much? After your death, the world rushes to define you. Some cast you as a tyrant, no better than the monarchs you claim to oppose. They count the dead. The soldiers lost in your endless campaigns, the civilians caught in the crossfire, the cities reduced to ash. They see your empire not as enlightenment, but domination. They remember your censorship, your spies, your silencing of dissent. They see the crown on your head and say, he betrayed the revolution. Others see something different. They remember a France in ruins, leaderless, directionless, until you rose. They recall your reforms. A legal system based on equality before the law, not bloodline. A government run by merit, not nobility. A society where a poor Corsican could rise to become emperor. They remember how you brought order to chaos, how you stood against the entrenched powers of Europe, how you refused to accept that the world must always be ruled by the old names and old systems. In many ways, you were a contradiction walking in boots. You spoke the language of liberty while consolidating total control. You waged war in the name of peace. You destroyed monarchies but built your own dynasty. You claimed to be the servant of the people, yet crowned yourself with your own hand. And yet, unlike so many tyrants, you left behind more than destruction. The Napoleonic Code still serves as the legal foundation in many countries. Your model of administration, centralized, efficient, professional, became the blueprint for modern states. Your idea of promotion by merit transformed armies and governments across the globe. You ignited nationalist movements in Italy, Germany, even in Latin America. In trying to control Europe, you awakened it. But perhaps your greatest legacy is the very question we keep asking. Can one person reshape history? Because you did. You were not born to power. You took it. You weren't handed greatness. You forged it in mud and smoke, in pen and ink, in steel and blood. You didn't follow tradition, you bent it. You reimagined what a single man could achieve. You believed that will alone could rewrite destiny. And for a time you were right. But power, once grasped, is never held forever. Empires rise fast and fall faster. You taught the world that ambition can elevate and destroy, that genius without restraint becomes tyranny, that victory without limits becomes burden. And yet, you are studied more than any general in history. You are quoted, copied, challenged. You live not just in statues and biographies, but in the systems you helped design, in the politics you disrupted, in the ambitions you inspired. You are the blueprint for the modern strongman and the modern reformer. You are a paradox too large to simplify. So was Napoleon a military genius or a manipulator of Europe? You were both. You mastered the battlefield like few ever could. Timing, terrain, morale, deception. Your victories at Austerlitz, Ulm, Marengo, and Jena are studied in military academies to this day. But you also mastered the invisible battlefield, politics. You knew when to smile and when to strike. You ruled not just with armies, but with symbols, ideas, and control over the narrative. You knew that to rule Europe, you had to shape how Europe saw you. Even in exile, you understood this. You told your story before others could. You said, "I am the revolution." You wrapped yourself in its colors, even as you replaced its ideals with your own. And in doing so, you ensured that the world would never stop asking the question that drove your legend. Was it genius or manipulation? Was it vision or vanity? Was it freedom or ambition? In the end, perhaps that is the essence of Napoleon. Not the man, but the question. A question that every great power since must face. A question you force us all to answer, not with words but with choices. Because once, you stood before the world and said, "Impossible is a word to be found only in the dictionary of fools." And then you made the impossible real. Napoleon Bonaparte remains one of the most complex and polarizing figures in world history. Born to a modest, noble family in Corsica, he rose meteorically through the ranks during the French Revolution, using brilliance, timing, and ambition to position himself at the center of power. As first consul and later emperor of the French, he transformed not only France's political and legal systems, but also redrew the map of Europe. A tactical genius on the battlefield, Napoleon was equally adept in political manipulation and propaganda. His victories, from Austerlitz to Jena, were legendary, and his reforms modernized vast swaths of the continent. Yet his relentless pursuit of control led to near-constant warfare, millions of deaths, and eventually his own downfall. The disastrous Russian campaign and the defeat at Waterloo marked the end of his reign, but not of his legacy. To some, Napoleon is the embodiment of tyrannical ambition, proof of how power can corrupt absolutely. To others, he is a symbol of meritocracy, vision, and transformative leadership. His Napoleonic Code, centralized government, and revolutionary ideals, albeit reshaped, still influence nations today. In truth, Napoleon defies simple categorization. He was both hero and usurper, reformer and autocrat, visionary and manipulator. His life challenges us to reconsider how we define greatness and at what cost it comes. He did not merely live through history, he carved it in stone. You stand once again at the head of an army. The year is 1815. The fields of Belgium stretch out before you, sodden from spring rains. You are older now, worn by exile and betrayal, but the fire in you still burns. The enemies of France have gathered again, British under Wellington, Prussians under Blücher. You believe you can break them before they unite. This is Waterloo. You position your forces with precision. You know the terrain. You believe in your commanders. And most of all, you believe in yourself. For a moment, it feels like the old days. Clarity, confidence, command. But as the battle drags on, things slip. Delays in attack. Miscommunications. The mud slows your artillery. Grouchy doesn't arrive in time. And then the Prussians do. They slam into your flank late in the day. Your lines buckle. The Imperial Guard, the invincible core of your army, is forced to retreat. You watch them break. Something you thought impossible. It is over. You flee the battlefield. The dream of a second empire dies in the mud. Captured, you are exiled again. This time farther. No gentle island near Italy, but a desolate rock in the middle of the Atlantic. St. Helena.
No escape.
No army. No audience. Only time. You spend your final years in reflection and dictation. You tell your version of events, page after page, hour after hour. You rewrite your own legend. You downplay the defeats, magnify the triumphs, blame others for the failures. And yet, even in the self-justification, there is brilliance. But let's rewind. Return to the height of your empire, 1805 to 1810. These were your golden years. Your power was unrivaled. You restructured Europe like a chessboard. Kingdoms rose and fell by your decree. The Holy Roman Empire, a 1,000-year relic, was dissolved under your pressure. You founded the Confederation of the Rhine, a puppet block to buffer against Austria and Prussia. Your vision wasn't just military, it was structural. You redefined how Europe thought about law, governance, and administration. The Napoleonic Code reached beyond France, influencing legal systems across the continent. Meritocracy replaced aristocracy in your bureaucracies. You built lycées, developed civil infrastructure, modernized everything from roads to postal systems. To many, you were the architect of modern Europe. But all of it came with a cost. Endless war drained lives. Millions perished in your campaigns. Cities were razed, economies shattered. You imposed censorship, crushed dissent, spied on opponents. You promised liberty, but only under your control. To those under your rule, you were both liberator and tyrant. In Germany, you stirred nationalist resistance. In Spain, you sparked brutal guerrilla warfare. In Russia, you awakened a patriotic rage. Everywhere you went, you left behind both progress and ruin. Your court mirrored your duality. You filled it with loyal marshals, many of humble birth, proof of your belief in talent over lineage. Yet you also adopted imperial trappings, golden eagles, grand processions, royal titles. You surrounded yourself with symbolism, even as you preached revolution's ideals. And then there was your personal life. You divorced Josephine, the love of your life, not for lack of affection, but for dynastic necessity. She could bear no heir. You married Marie-Louise of Austria, niece of Marie Antoinette, linking yourself to the very monarchy your revolution had destroyed. It was a calculated move and a bitter one. When your son was born, Napoleon II, you believed you had secured your legacy. A new dynasty, a new empire, but it would not last. Your enemies had changed. Once fearful monarchies, they had adapted. They learned your methods, your speed, your ruthlessness. They united not just in military terms, but in spirit. You had become what they needed you to be, a common threat. And as much as you tried to shape the narrative, through proclamations, monuments, parades, events began slipping from your control. The Peninsular War turned into a quagmire. The Russian campaign was a disaster. The continental system backfired. Your aura of invincibility cracked. And yet, your personal charisma never faded. Even your enemies admired you. Wellington called you the greatest man of action the world has ever known. Tolstoy made you a central figure in War and Peace. Artists, writers, and thinkers across Europe, some despised you, but few ignored you. On St. Helena, the weather is unforgiving. The food is bland. The companionship is minimal. Your health declines, likely stomach cancer. But you continue dictating, shaping the version of Napoleon you want remembered. A hero betrayed, a visionary misunderstood, a martyr to ambition. You die on May 5, 1821, at the age of 51. No grand funeral.
No imperial glory.
Just a lonely death on a forgotten rock. But you knew this moment would come. That's why you told your story before others could. That's why you left statues, laws, maps, and myths. You once said, "History is a set of lies agreed upon." And you made sure yours was among the most carefully curated of them all. Because even now, centuries later, the world still asks, was he a liberator? A dictator? A genius? A monster? You were perhaps all of them.